Hi, everyone. David and I sat down with Michael Reynolds, who is a certified financial planner. He also has his own financial firm called Elevation Financial, and he has some experience in financial therapy. We talked all about money management, how homeschooling families can teach their kids to manage money well, and we talked a little bit about money psychology. It was a great conversation, and I hope you enjoy.
If you could give us just a quick introduction of who you are, kind of what you do. We're going to be talking a lot about finances today, which is super important for homeschooling families in my mind. Just anyone that doesn't know who you are, just coming across, you can just give yourself a quick rundown.
Yeah, happy to. Yeah. Name's Michael Reynolds. I'm a certified financial planner. I've been in the financial services industry since about 2014. Worked at a larger firm for a while and then launched my own firm in 2019. Launched it right before COVID, so that was kind of fun.
Wow.
So I rented an office, then realized I wasn't going to be using it for a while. So, so I primarily
Yep.
work virtually. I've got clients all over the country. I help families of all different stages in their financial life, whether it's just getting started or closer to retirement. And like I said, just kind of work from home primarily virtually and um, work with people at all stages of life. So help them with financial planning, investment management. I work with a lot of business owners also, helping them kind of launch and run their business. Bookkeeping and tax is also part of that sometimes. Also a career changer. I used to own a digital marketing agency before I changed careers to become a financial planner. So
No
it's
way.
fun using my marketing and technology background to market my own firm now.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Are you the only person in the firm, or are you running everything yourself when you're doing it?
Primarily, I do have a virtual assistant,
Okay.
and I'm having
Nice.
her do a little more. So over time, she'll probably start to do more admin work, and I may bring on one or two people down the road, but primarily it's just me. Yeah.
Okay, heck yeah. And that is basically so if a parents are looking at you, they need help with taxes, they need anything. Do you have anything along the lines of, even if it's just like a suggestion? I feel like with kids, they need to early on start kind of understanding the things I found out once I started running a business, instead of having a
Mhm.
2 year learning curve of everything, it'd be better if they could kind of intro into the world having that knowledge when it comes to like getting them accustomed, figuring out like what different things are, even like when it comes to running a business, simple things like overhead and actually looking at it, getting the numbers right. Do you have any suggestions of what they can do to start getting the kids in front of that information?
Yeah, to start thinking about starting a business, you mean?
Just more along the lines like if it's so for me, I feel like if it's a business owner, yeah, if they want to do it. But even if you're an employee, understanding what the businesses are have to pay all the expenses, if you can really have that down packed, when you enter into a business, you can have an educated conversation with the business owner and see exactly, okay, well, this is going to be my cap with their business with all these other things kind of fit in and understand just the finances behind everything to be an asset to the business, but more importantly, understand what that business can provide for them in the long run.
Yeah, so if I hear you correctly, you're kind of thinking about how business owners can understand their financials, how expenses
Yep.
tie into that. Yeah, so a lot of businesses I see, um, they think they need lots of overhead to start, for example. I'm a big advocate of starting a business lean and very minimal. That's why I love service businesses primarily. A lot of people say, oh, well, I'm going to start a product business or an app or some tech business, and those are very difficult to get off the ground. But I love service businesses. So whether it's kids doing this, just kind of starting out, or adults looking for a side business or changing careers. I love service businesses, stuff like home care services,
Yep.
consulting, education, tutoring, training, anything you can start where it's just your time and labor and very low overhead. So keeping expenses low is a really great place to start when launching a business.
No, and that's we have a service-based business, so my brother and I
Mhm.
do, and we're trying to put together a course right now just to have the kids in high school, even if it's just like a little side hustle thing,
Mhm.
get out there, start doing it because it is once you recognize like, oh wow, like I really can just put in a little bit of effort, a little bit of sweat equity, and
Mhm.
make pretty good money right from the get-go. You don't have no wait time, like I said, you don't have to buy a bunch of products, have
Mhm.
them stored or whatnot. Now when it comes to the education side of it, would you recommend like books for the kids to start getting their knowledge up? Podcasts. I know you have a podcast, so I want you to share that as well.
Mhm.
Like what would you suggest the best for the kids to start kind of really immersing themselves in that information?
So there are books out there, there's courses, lots of information out there. There's one really timeless book out there called The E-Myth, which has been around for a long time. It's probably one of the better ones to kind of start with when thinking about systems. But I really encourage people just to start making money. And as simple as and silly as that sounds, so many business owners, whether it's, a kid or an adult, they think, oh, I'm going to start a business. I've got to have all this stuff in place. I've got to have all these things, systems and software and technology and supplies and everything. And they spend all that time getting all that stuff ready when they could just be making money and making mistakes and learning from the
Yep.
mistakes quickly. So you do boat detailing, is that right?
That's what we do. Yes, sir.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, you could, if you were going to start a business like that, sure, you could, get an expensive website and a bunch of systems in place and technology and advertising, or you could just ask a few friends, hey, do you know anybody that needs boat detailing, and start making money and then reinvest that money back. And so I think the best teacher is just doing, getting out there and getting a few clients the old-fashioned
Without a doubt.
way,
Yep.
networking, asking for referrals, and then after you get your first 3 to 5 clients, you're going to understand, okay, so here's how I should be billing them. Here's the price I should charge. Here's how I should take payments. Here is, the feedback they gave me. And here's how I can deliver service better. That's going to be the biggest teacher.
Without a doubt. And honestly, the way we started it was we were working construction. We got in a huge argument on the way home because I was going to pick up couches and trying to sell them on Craigslist. And he got tired of going with me, my brother.
Hmm.
And we came up with the idea. That day, we just went, printed out flyers, and then went door knocking.
Hmm.
And it was literally, like you said, after a couple of jobs and you start learning, like, okay, like you said, this is how much I should be charging. I thought this job was going to be one day. It took
Hmm.
two, but it is the best teacher. And that is honestly the analysis paralysis that will kill us pretty much a
Yeah.
lot of good dreams. So getting out there, going for it, I couldn't like be a more of a support than that. Now, when it comes to homeschooling families, I don't know if there's any specific like tax deductions at home. I know we have different programs that are kind of rolling out recently, but would you suggest that like they bring the kids like high school age, maybe even middle school, and kind of get them involved in like understanding like, okay, these are the taxes we pay as a house. These are, and having the kids kind of go through it coming up, or would you think that's something that should be done kind of after they're out of school and kind of learn on their own?
No, I think it's really valuable.
You
One of
do?
the, I've got a 10-year-old and a 4-year-old, and the
Okay.
4-year-old's a little bit early to understand money, but the 10-year-old, he wants Robux and, you know,
Yep.
V-Bucks for Fortnite and stuff like that. And so, he has an allowance every week, and, we tie that to family contribution, things he does around the
Nice.
house. But we also give him opportunity to earn more. Like, hey, if you vacuum the floor, you'll get $5. And it's like, we use a green light account to send that to his, bank account. So, I think it's really good to start as early as possible, training kids that, money comes from work. You deliver a service, you provide value, you do something, and you get paid for that. Now, I think there's a balance to strike though, because you don't want to breed entitlement by saying, well, you only do things to get money, because that's not how we want to operate. We want to tell kids that, hey, you do things sometimes because you're doing acts of service, you're part of the
Yep.
family, you want to help other people. That's all things you want to instill in kids. But at the same time, you want to strike a balance and saying, well, if you want to earn what you want to earn, then some of that comes from work and delivering value. So we do tie certain jobs around the house to money, and that's a really good way to start instilling that mindset of, hey, I don't just get money randomly. I need to earn it. I need to provide value to earn that money. I think it's really useful.
No, I think it is too. And it starts to teach them that if there's a problem, you provide the solution, you're going to get paid accordingly. Um, Now, with those accounts, what would you suggest? I know there's like, I think it's like the 2020 something, but like when you're giving him that money, and I know they're still young right now, so maybe they're older, are you going to have them start pushing a percentage into stocks and things like that? Or are you going to kind of like allow them to kind of do it on their own? Do you think that they should start early? Like, hey, when you get this much money, X goes to savings, X
Mhm.
goes to investing. What's left over is kind of your play money. Or do you think it's more important just to kind of let them have the money at first, and then as they get older, start teaching them, hey, you should do this?
So I think it's going to depend on each child individually. My 10-year-old, I thought he would be more interested in investing at this point, but he's not quite there yet. He has ADHD, a little bit distracted by the things. So maybe
Yeah.
in a few
And he's
years
only
we can try that.
10.
He's only 10. So
Yeah.
I'd say like when your child starts getting interested in like, okay, I do want to officially earn more money because I want things, that's a good time to start thinking about investing. So a lot of the um, child-specific bank accounts like Greenlight, for example, or others do have an investing component. And I
Okay.
think that's a good time to say, well, what are some goals you want for the future? In a few years, do you want to buy a car? Do you want something else? Like maybe you invest some of this money a little bit for something down the road, or even, 5, 10 years down the road. And if they start thinking that long-term way, you can start to kind of help them understand compound interest, how
without doubt.
investments work. So I think it really depends on the child. You're going to have to kind of gauge it based on their interest, because if you push it, we all know, what are they going to do? Well, nope, nope, I don't want to listen, Dad. So it's important to kind of go with the grain of where their interest lies, I think.
No, I like that. Now, as homeschooling families, what would you suggest like is the best way they can kind of increase their financial literacy? I mean, a lot of homeschooling, not all of them, but a lot of homeschooling families are just hardworking families. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? It's not like they come from super rich or whatnot. So I would think that in my mind, the whole family should be getting this knowledge and learning it.
Hmm.
So I would say they should like learn it together. But where would you start if you're a homeschooling family? You don't have any idea. You're kind of just paying your bills month to month. Where would you start, and what would you kind of do to like get everyone to understand and increase their financial knowledge when it
Hmm.
comes to this?
Yeah, yeah. So there's quite a few resources out there. Khan Academy is a great resource. I
Mm,
spent a lot of time recommending Khan Academy's financial literacy courses because
okay.
they have a really solid foundation. And so that's probably a great start. There's also some influencers out there that do have, they charge money for their courses. There's Dave Ramsey, there's Ramit Sethi, and they're pretty good, but I would caution people to be a little bit wary of getting too involved in those types of courses because they try to sell you more stuff. So, for example, Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace, honestly, a great course. I mean, it's a really great foundation for families. Not everyone agrees with Dave Ramsey as an individual, so you kind of have to weigh that. And then Ramit Sethi is another one. I'm not crazy about some of his perspectives, but he does have a really good foundation of how to think about money. And there's a lot of good podcasts out there as well. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I've got one that teaches money concepts. And then, so when you're looking at the source, look for credentials. Um, and I would be, like I said, I'd be kind of careful of getting too involved in high, very expensive courses that are like promising magical results for a lot of money. There's plenty of free information out there or low cost information out there.
Can you give the name of your podcast real quick for everyone?
Yeah, it's called Wealth Redefined.
Okay.
Yep.
And then now since we're kind of on the Dave Ramsey, where would you lie? Because I like listening to kind of everybody. I kind of like to
Mhm.
just really go with the broad horizon and pick things that I like. So like you have like Robert Kiyosaki, who's like debt all the way, and then you have Dave Ramsey, it's like cash, cash, cash. Where
Yeah.
would you lie kind of on that spectrum in between those?
So I do not like debt at all.
You don't like that at all, okay?
Not at all. So yeah, the biggest, I guess if there's one thing I see that can cause a lot of problems universally across the families I work with, it's debt.
Mm,
I work with families who, they have lots of debt, credit card payments, car loans, other types of loans, vehicles they can't afford, and it's very, very difficult to climb out of debt once you've gotten entrenched in it, once you're just kind of drowning in payments. And so, I help families work through that, help them kind of, hey, snowball it or whatever method we're going to use, we're going to overcome it. And it takes time and discipline. But the families that are debt free or become debt free or keep their debt low, they have so many more options, so much more flexibility, so much more peace of mind, and the ability to do so much more, whether it's help their kids, help their family fulfill dreams, help others, be generous to their community and their other organizations. Like it's just such a difference. So if there's one thing I would tell people that's like one principle of finance to latch onto, it's stay away from debt. Keep debt low and do not take on debt if possible.
yeah, and the interest we learned the hard way. We went out like I think it was our second year, maybe it was after our first year of business. We got this loan. Um, it was through our CRM, and it was like we didn't understand interest at the time. It was like
Mhm.
we'll just take 23% off of every invoice you collect. So we're like, oh yeah, let's do
Ooh,
it. And then
wow.
yeah, we had about a year and like 3 months of just like working and being like, where is the money? And then
Yeah,
we started educating ourselves, and it was like, oh, our margin is getting paying back the
that's
loan right
rough. Yeah.
now. Yeah, so it was a hard lesson, but it's definitely true what you're saying because you don't recognize as well as like how much the interest actually adds up until you're in it, and then you're seeing it every
Mhm.
day in your bank statement. Like, what is going on? And then you start doing the math, and you're like, oh, okay, now I understand how this can actually kill families and just like
Mhm.
completely demolish people's bank accounts. When it comes to credit cards, what would you suggest? Like, not so much of the kids getting credit cards, but understanding, like, for instance, if you just get a credit card, you start swiping like crazy. Next thing you know, you're gonna be paying. You're gonna have to pay the minimum. You're gonna be stuck in it forever. Your credit's gonna take a hit. So, how would you suggest the kids go about understanding what a credit card is, and would you suggest you even take them on at all?
So I'm kind of a weirdo. I'm also anti-credit card. I
Okay.
do have a credit card and I occasionally use it mainly for travel. Credit
Okay.
cards can be useful for travel, things like renting a car, for example.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically impossible to rent a car with a debit card. So sometimes it makes sense.
Yep.
But 99.9% of the time I use debit cards and that's my go-to. So I'm a little weird. I realize that's not realistic for a lot of people. They just won't do it. But so when it comes to your specific question about kids, I am not a fan of introducing kids to credit cards, if at all possible. There are numerous studies, include there's a famous MIT study that talks about how when you swipe a credit card, the pleasure centers of your brain are activated. And Dave Ramsey talks about this also, and he's right about this. Whereas if you swipe a debit card or cash, the
It
pain
hits
center is activated because you feel the money, you know the money's leaving your bank account, you know the
you.
money's leaving your hands. And so it's true that for the most part, when we buy things with credit cards, we tend to spend more money.
Yep.
And so credit cards are a really good way to teach kids or anybody really to just overspend, impulse spend, spend without thinking of the consequences, and suddenly you're in debt. And I see it all the time with families I work with. They're drowning in credit card debt. They have no idea how they got there because they just spent, and it was just so easy. So
No, I
I
think
avoid
that's
credit cards if at all possible.
yeah, no, that's a good idea. And also it makes sense now that you say that because I can look back at my own time. When I swipe a credit card, it is so much, it's more just like free money, you think. And
Mhm.
then you hit the debit card and you're like, wow, I can't believe this much money is coming out of my bank account right now.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I love that. Now, when it comes to educating the kids, so like say if you're against them, that's fine. How would you suggest the parents like show the kids and really get that message instilled that hey, like these are not good, and then without the kids having to go through that experience. So like kind of like giving the kids the information beforehand. Now we know kids are kind of when they go off, they're going to make their own decisions, but at least
Mhm.
presenting them with that information of all the negatives that can come with it. How would you suggest parents like kind of get that message around them? Would it be just videos, discussions, or anything like along those lines?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Part of me feels like they just have to figure it out by getting in credit card debt and then getting out. That's how I had to learn. I
Yeah.
went to college. I got the credit cards because they gave me free pizza and t-shirts on the corner of the college campus, right? We all probably encountered that. So that's my first credit card, and I was buying Taco Bell every night on it. Suddenly, I was, $10,000 in credit card debt when I graduated. So
Yeah.
that was a very real experience. And I'm like, wow, this sucks.
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with this. And so part of me thinks there's not much you can do besides just let them figure it out. But that's not a great answer. So on the alternative side, um, one thing we can do, I think, is to illustrate how much of your cash flow debt payments really eat into. So your example of the invoices was great. 23% coming off every invoice. That's a lot. That's a
Wow.
quarter of your revenue, basically.
Yep.
And so, if your child is maybe going to college or just kind of starting out, and you're like, hey, so here's how much rent's going to cost. Here's how much money's coming in. If you continue to rack up credit card debt, you're going to be paying this much in minimum payments every month, and that's going to eat up a lot of cash flow that you could be using for something else. And by the way, the balance is not going to go away because you're not paying more than the minimum, and you're going to be stuck with this for a long time. And so, just kind of showing the numbers once they're ready to see the numbers, I think is a good start.
I like that. I like that. Now, when it comes to like, okay, let's go like a high school age kid, right? Do you have any books that you can suggest to start increasing their financial knowledge? That would be maybe appropriate for that age group to like right before they're about to go off to college or go to work or start a business. That's going to give them kind of the right frameworks to operate under.
Yeah, there is one that gets really good reviews. I've tried to give it to my 10-year-old, and he hasn't quite latched onto it yet, but it's called Investing for Kids.
Okay.
Um, I want to remind myself of the age range. I think it's for all ages. Yeah, it's called Investing for Kids, and I think it's a little on the younger side,
Okay.
but I think it's probably good for all ages, even up to maybe early high school. It says 8 to 12, so it might be a little young, but that's a good one for maybe earlier ages. Um, and that one gets really good reviews. It's kind of a basic fundamental investing book. As they get older, there are, some other books. Again, if we like Dave Ramsey, The Total Money Makeover is a fantastic book. I try to separate Dave Ramsey, the personality, from the material because his material is very good, but his personality can be controversial, so I'm acknowledging that.
Yeah, no,
Um, and then there's one that gets really good reviews called A Simple Path to Wealth. That's
okay.
a really popular one among DIYers. It's a really good walkthrough of just kind of the basics of building wealth and investing and keeping it really simple, which I'm a fan of. So those are a few I would think of.
Hey, I like it too. The 8 to 12 is even better, I think, starting them even earlier.
Mhm.
And I have a close friend who he's the one that I actually pretty much not discovered Dave Ramsey, but like pretty much taught him everything about speaking on the radio. And he said he is quite the man to deal with. So I can understand that. But I listen to his stuff a lot about when it comes to leadership, a little bit about the finances. I do think he is a good person to listen to. And sometimes he can go off on a rant that's kind of funny. Um, Now let's go kind of like the household instead of the kids. When it comes to obviously like modeling, it's going to be a great example that helps teach them, you know. But would you think that parents showing an interest in actually learning about finances, having those discussions together of like, okay, here's where we're at as a household. We have this much debt. We're going to do this to solve it. Or hey, we've paid off
Mhm.
our debt. Now we're going to start building wealth. Do you think it's just simply modeling it, or do you think it's kind of like involving the family where everyone's growing, everyone's on the same page? Or do you think so if the man handles the finances, he doesn't need to talk about it? Like I don't know if I'm making myself clear here or not.
Yeah, yeah.
It's more
Yeah,
of
I
like
think it's both, and I think you've
okay,
touched on something really important, which is I think you kind of jokingly say, "Oh, the man handles it, don't need to talk about it," and that's
yeah,
kind of how we grew up in a lot of ways. Our parents and grandparents they didn't talk about money. The husband went off to work, earned money, it magically came from somewhere. No one asked questions. Right? And like that's kind of the world in the past that our parents lived in, right? Um, I think that needs to change, and luckily it is changing.
hmm
Now, I don't think we need to enmesh our children in unhealthy ways in our finances by saying, "Oh, we're having financial trouble. We don't want that."
no, no, no,
I think we do need to say things like, "Hey, we've got some debt to pay off. Here's what debt means, and here's how we're going to do it before we go on that vacation as a family." And in fact, recently, last week, I just met with one of my clients, and they were struggling to kind of figure out how to get debt paid off. And so I made the debt snowball chart for them. I basically said, "Okay, here's your chart. You've got, I think it was 7 debts, from credit card debt to, home improvement loans and other loans and car stuff like that." And so I listed them all out, smallest to largest, debt snowball, and I put it, here's the name of the debt, here's the total, and then in the last column I said, here's your reward. So this is for you to print out, put on your fridge, and after you pay off every debt, you're going to mark it off with a pen and you're going to go enjoy that reward. So maybe for a
love it.
small debt, it's like go out for ice cream as a family.
Yep.
Maybe for the $10,000 debt, it's going to be, hey, we're going to go on a quick overnight trip to, a fun place as a family or whatever.
Yep.
Or we're going to buy a new video game for the family, whatever, something small.
Yep.
Next debt, as they get progressively larger, the reward gets bigger. And then by the time they pay off the $30,000 debt at the bottom, maybe it's, hey, we're going to go on a weekend cruise or whatever. We're going to do something really fun. And so I think that kind of stuff shows kids and our family in general how we're going to work toward a goal together. So the financial literacy part's important, but also just the goal setting part's important. So that's one way to think about it. And then also saving up for something like, hey, the kids want a video game system. Well, okay, maybe there's no birthdays coming up, so something they want sooner. Well, okay, you do some chores and jobs and maybe work for neighbors, and I'll match half of what you raise. And once you get to half, we'll buy your video game system for the family or something. So working toward goals, whether it's debt repayment or saving up, I think is a really good way to involve your family and kids in learning how that stuff works.
No, I love that idea too, of having this little reward. So that way also when you're going through it,
Mhm.
you get that little bit of enjoyment as well. It's not like you're drowning in everything. Okay, boom, I get my little ice cream trip. Then I get like you said, we're gonna go
Mhm.
for a day or something. That's a great idea. Now, can you just like say like somebody doesn't know what debt snowballing is? Can you just kind of give a
Mhm.
quick description of kind of what that
Yeah.
entails?
Yeah, so debt snowball is one method of paying off debts. And so if you have a lot of debt, it can be very overwhelming. And a lot of people would say, well, let's focus on interest rate. And that's debt avalanche, which is paying off highest interest rate first. But
Yeah.
the problem with that is so much of personal finance is psychology. And so if you're looking at like 10 different debts, it just feels overwhelming. It's like, well, where do I start? And I've got maybe I pick the highest interest rate, which is a high balance, and I'm not really seeing much progress because the list is still there.
Hmm.
So the debt snowball says, well, we're just going to list debts smallest to largest, and you're going to pay minimums on everything except the smallest debt. And
Okay.
on the smallest debt, you're going to put every bit of extra money you have toward that debt to knock it out as quickly as possible. You mark it off, you roll to the next one. Minimums on everything except the next smallest debt. And the reason that works is because psychologically you see quick wins and you get excited and you build psychological momentum, which is actually how debt gets paid off. So you might pay a little more in interest because you're ignoring interest rates, which the math people get mad about, but that's okay. We'll pay a little more in interest because we're going to take that psychological momentum and put it to work.
Yeah, and it's gonna be easier to actually get everything done if you're getting
Mhm.
those momentums there. And then
Yeah,
you said, just to be correct, you said when you do it, the interest rate is called debt avalanche.
the
So that would
avalanche.
just be
Yeah,
the opposite. Okay, all right.
yeah.
I never heard of the debt avalanche before.
Yeah. There's a third
Um,
method also I want to mention called the anger
oh, go ahead.
method. If you have, let's say, five debts and you've got one debt, it may not be the smallest debt, but it might be the debt you're most angry about, whether it's like a student loan or some, I don't know, whatever it is, a credit card that made you mad for some reason. Like if there's a debt you're angry about, the anger method says pay that off first because you get excited. So that's one method also. But out of those
Okay.
three, the debt snowball I think is the most effective.
All right. Now, when
David,
you're,
can I just ask a
yes,
quick
ma'am.
question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
You don't have
He
to ask
told me I should
permission.
interrupt.
Yeah,
He
don't
told
ask
me.
permission. Just jump in there. Say, David, shut up.
Okay.
Go.
Okay. So I just want to ask, are you concerned about, since you said you're not into credit cards, are you concerned with this shift to like a cashless, I guess you can call it a more cashless society, virtual money? Are you concerned that that will impact financial literacy?
Not particularly, just because I use debit cards, which is just as convenient.
Yeah.
So, swiping a
Okay.
debit card is just as convenient, but
Mhm.
you can feel the money leaving your bank account. So
Yeah.
it's almost as good as cash.
Okay.
So no, I'm
Mhm.
not too concerned about that. No, I rarely use
Okay.
cash.
Okay, okay, good. And then I graduated debt free from college. I was able to pay cash and had some financial help from family members.
Mhm.
Do you recommend that, or do you recommend going into a little debt for, high school students or students who are in college?
So if possible, I like to avoid student loans.
Yeah.
Student loans
Mhm.
are a huge problem, as you probably know. The
Yep.
system's a mess. People are drowning in student loan debt. It's
Mhm.
just a
Mhm.
dumpster fire. So,
Yep.
so
Yeah.
if we can avoid student loan debt, I think it's really useful. Now, if it's unavoidable, for example, let's say you're going to law school or med school, like no one can afford
Mhm.
that. So you've got to take
Yeah.
on loans most likely. There's some
Mhm.
exceptions, there's some ways, military possibly, but in
Yeah.
general, it's very difficult. So maybe yes, but in general, if you can keep costs low by going to a state school, maybe
Mhm.
even going to community college for the first couple of years to get your
Yeah.
prereqs out of the way. I've got families that are
Mhm.
doing that. They're like, yeah, my kid's going to community college for 2 years. They're living at
Mhm.
home. We're going to pay almost
Yep.
nothing for college, and then they're going to transfer to the local state school in year
I did
three.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The community
And I
college was
love that
great.
plan. I love that
Yes.
because, what do we do in college? We waste a bunch of time and money for the first couple of years figuring things
Hmm.
out.
Yep.
That's
Why,
right.
why spend so much on
Hmm.
that?
That's
So,
right.
so yes, to answer your question, I like to avoid student loans if
Hmm.
possible. So a hybrid of maybe a little bit of loans with
Hmm.
working through school, a little bit of parent
Yeah.
help, I think is a good combination.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Okay, David, it's all yours.
You'd better jump back in with more questions by the end of this.
Okay, I'll try.
So just kind of like off that though, it's weird because when I was in college, I had a baseball scholarship and I would just go down to the financial office at the beginning of every year and just ask where to sign for the loans to cover the rest.
Mm,
You know, and
yep.
they would freely just give me that money.
Mhm.
But then now we're running a business trying to get a loan, and it's like, they're pulling your teeth trying to see if you're going to be able to get it. So I don't understand. Like you got an 18-year-old who's given money to go to school with no guarantee of return, but that same 18-year-old you won't give money to go start a business. So it's kind of weird how the student loans are kind of just
I agree.
they're
Yeah.
just handed out. It's not, and honestly, I think it is to kind of put. I think most of our debt is student loans, for if I'm not mistaken. When you look at the numbers of it, don't
A
quote
lot
me.
of it is. Yeah.
A
Yeah.
lot of it is, yeah. Now when it comes to basics of finances, so like let's say we'll say like 12 and up.
Mhm.
just words, vocabulary, pretty much. What should they start, like the parents should start kind of teaching their kids when it comes to like, debt, income, just basic financial vocabulary? What
Hmm.
would you start as like the generic place to start for them teaching their kids?
Yeah, sure. I would say budget is a great
Okay.
word to teach.
Love it. Love it. Love
So
it.
a lot of people, a lot of financial influencers, in fact, are very anti using the word budget. They try to reframe it. For example, I think Ramit Sethi calls it a conscious spending plan. Well, it's a budget, you know? Um, so I'm a little contrarian. I say, you know what? Don't shy away from the word budget. Call it a budget.
Yep.
You know, there may be some negative connotations around it, but let's embrace that word. A budget is simply a plan for your spending. So teaching kids what a budget is and how it works, I think, is really critical. Obviously, words like debt, cash, stocks, bonds, understanding how the stock market works and what those things are. It might be a little advanced for a 12-year-old, but maybe later on.
Okay.
Um, so those are kind of the basics. Cash flow, what cash flow means, you know, money coming in, money going out. That's part of the budget conversation. Interest, a really important word. You can earn interest or you can pay interest. And we want to be earning interest, not paying it. So that word is going to be really critical. Um, yeah, those are kind of the basics. You know, I
Those are the
would,
basics right there.
yeah.
I like that. Now, so we have no credit cards, avoiding debt. Let's say a kid is kind of entering into the world. He's maybe a junior, senior in high school, right?
Mhm.
What would you, or let's say it's your kid before he goes off, what are you going to do to kind of educate him into the future decisions he's going to be making when it comes to, I know you said like the credit cards, explaining it to him a little bit,
Mhm.
but what are you going to do to kind of set him up to when he goes into the world and he's presented with opportunities, he kind of has his own values and morals to kind of run him through before he makes those decisions?
Yeah, yeah. So I want to preface this by saying what we think we're going to do is, you know, one thing and how reality actually works is a different thing. So yeah, my son's
Yep.
10. I'm convinced at 18, I'm going to send him to college with all this knowledge. He's going to make great choices, obviously, right? Reality, you know, we can't control what our kids do. That said, you know, there's kind of three principles that I want to try to instill in my kids as they enter adulthood. One is, we talked about this before, keep debt low. I want to instill this principle of avoid debt at all possible, or if at all possible. Second would be keep savings high. I want them to value having lots of cash on hand, not literal cash and bills,
Yeah.
but like, you know, money in the
Yeah.
bank. You know, the values of having a separate emergency fund set aside, a separate savings account set aside, adding to that consistently, and having a big pile of cash on hand for emergencies or for goals. And the third thing is savings rate. I want to instill this concept of you should always be tracking and understanding how much of your money you're saving, putting into retirement accounts, putting into investment accounts, putting into savings. Um, if you tackle those three things and you instill those values, avoid debt, build up savings, and increase your savings rate when it comes to cash flow, that's 90% of what's going to help people be successful. Those three things alone are like light years ahead of what, you know, many Americans are doing. So that's going to be kind of the main thing I'm going to focus on.
I love that. I love that. Now, when you keeping debt low, when it comes to I'm renting because in South Florida,
Mhm.
every home is now is $1 million, so it's
Yeah.
it's quite the marketplace. But where would you? So we rent because we understand exactly how much money is going to come out of our account
Mhm.
for the cost of living. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah.
Where would you suggest when someone's financially stable enough? I guess this is kind of a selfish question here, but like when would you suggest like, okay, I'm in a financially good place to make that purchase of a home, to understand there's going to be upkeep, there's going to be things that taxes, insurance, everything like that,
Mhm.
compared to just having like we are now where we understand, okay, $50,000 a year is going to come out and go cover rent for us every
Mhm.
single year. No more, no less. So it's easy for us to budget around it. Where would you suggest is when you're in, do you want to pay cash for the house? Like, how would you suggest managing the debt when it comes to being a home buyer?
Yeah, yeah, it's a good question. So first off, renting is great for many people. It's a if you like the trade-off of not having to mow your lawn or mess with, you
Yeah.
know, maintenance, like renting is awesome. I would just consider it part of your debt to income ratio. It's part of the some people wouldn't call it a debt payment, but it's actually a kind of a commitment I would count as part of your debt to income ratio. So as long as the numbers work, that works. Um, in general, I don't know if I'm more pro homeownership than others. Like, it just depends on who you talk to and a lot of factors. It's so personalized. But I like the idea of owning a home as quickly as possible. Even if it's, maybe an FHA, low down payment, you're building equity faster and you're starting the momentum faster of rolling equity into your next home, your next home, your next home. So as long as it fits into your cash flow, so as part of your debt to income ratio, we want that to be well under 30%, ideally less than 25 to 20%. I like a really low debt to income ratio. So, if you can keep it under 25% total, that's ideal. Um, your mortgage, I think, should be 20% or less, if possible, of your cash flow, of your household income. And as long as you have a good emergency fund set aside for maintenance and stuff that pops up and water heaters breaking and stuff like that, and you've got, good steady income, then I think that's the right time. I wouldn't overthink it too much if all those things are in place. Because again, you're building equity that's an investment that you can roll into your next home and that equity becomes really valuable. So, um, I'm probably a little more pro getting into a home earlier than some people. That's just kind of
So
my
that
take.
would be considered good debt then if you're doing, because if I think the FHA first time home buyer is like 5%, if I'm not mistaken.
3.5%. Yeah.
3.5%, so even less. So that would be a opportunity then that you would consider it's good debt because it makes money. You're only paying 3% down. I don't know if I'm being
Well, I hesitate to call any debt good. I don't think any debt is good,
okay.
but that's probably the
So
least bad debt.
the least bad
I
debt.
mean,
Okay,
it's virtually impossible to buy a home without a mortgage. So realistically,
that's
the
kind of where
least
I
bad
was
debt.
getting
Yeah.
at. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Now when it comes to the kids, let's say they want to pursue a field in finances,
Mhm.
just whether it's being someone like you, someone that's working at a firm, where would you suggest they start to kind of get the information if this is something they enjoy?
Yeah, it's a great question. So finance is kind of a broad umbrella. So it
Hmm.
could be financial planner, which is what I do. Could be working at a bank or doing
Yep.
accounting or taxes or something else. Whatever it is. A lot of universities now have programs for that. For example, I was did a presentation in Ohio last week, and someone from Ohio State was there, and they're like, yeah, we've got a CFP program at the university. It's a Certified Financial Planner program. So, definitely look into your college and see if they have tracks like that. But going back to the business conversation at the very beginning, real world experience is the best. So, shadow financial planners, a lot of financial advisors like myself will, meet with potential, young financial planners and let them kind of shadow the work we do. They'll talk to you about what the career looks like. So I would say network with other people in that profession. And there's lots of organizations for that. So for example, financial planners, FPA is a great association to attend some meetings and meet people. NAPFA, XY Planning Network, lots of organizations. So look for the association for the profession you're interested in and
Okay,
just show up to the meetings and just talk to people.
I love that. Um, when it comes to, like, for instance, my brother is more of the finances. It kind of drives me. I'm like your son. I'm ADHD. I'm off the wall. I don't want to think about it. I want to think about
Yeah.
how to go make more money. Um,
Also
but
ADHD here, me too. Yeah.
oh, are you really?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So when it comes to that, what would you say are skills they need to, if they're considering it? Obviously, you got to have, accounting, you got to have your maths, whatnot. But even you running your business, you still have to have people skills. You still have to, you're someone that's coming to you with, like the example you gave, they had 7 debts they're trying to pay off. You got to kind of be able to talk to them and communicate with them in a way that they understand that their life's not over. So what are some skills that are involved when it comes to being a CFP?
Mhm. Systems, systems, systems. I
Okay.
rely heavily on systems. So, if I don't have my CRM and my calendar telling me what to do every day, I'm all over the place, right? I'm not going to I'm going to, chase some shiny project that I'm interested in. But luckily, I have systems built in my CRM, for example, that tell me, hey, here's workflows that are in progress. Here's all the clients that need things. And that's what you have to rely on. So I'm heavily into processes on my CRM. My calendar is blocked very meticulously, tells me exactly what to do every day. I've got time blocked off for certain projects. So I think it's really, really valuable for neurodivergent folks like us to really rely on building out systems that are a framework and a foundation to drive the work. And that really frees us up to be creative and be ourselves, because we're great
Yep.
at dealing with people, right? Like we can talk to
Yep.
people, we're very put a lot of energy into the work we do and the passion for it. That's what makes that's a strength in our work, whether it's a CFP or a business owner like yourself doing boat detailing. We're both business owners and we deal with
Yep.
people, right? So that's a strength. But the not fun stuff, the admin stuff, that has to be driven by processes that are, driven by things like CRM, calendars,
Yep.
technology. That really helps.
I love that. I love
That's why
that.
David hired me.
That's
There you go.
exactly
Or
why
someone like Beth to run your business. Absolutely.
when it came to this nonprofit, we were starting. I knew right from the beginning. I was like, I have limited time and capability at this. I need someone
Yeah,
that can do it, and she fills the
exactly.
role perfectly. Now, before I ask any more questions, I want to get Beth a little more involved. Beth, you got any more questions here?
I do have one more. So I took Dave Ramsey's, his high school course when I was in high school. And he talked about doing the $500 emergency fund. And that actually helped me get through a good chunk of college. So is
Mhm.
that something you recommend? And if so, should kids do that on their own, or is that something parents should start for them? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
So my take's a little bit different. I think $500 to $1,000 is kind of his range of emergency fund. I think it's too
Yeah.
low. So
Mhm.
if you're an adult with a job, I think your
Right.
emergency fund minimum should be 1 month as a start. So
Okay.
1 month of expenses. So if you spend $3,000 a month or $5,000 a month, your emergency
Mhm.
fund should be at minimum $5,000 to start with before you do anything else.
Yeah.
As it, depends on the age. If you're a child, I mean, emergency fund isn't really as much of a thing if you're a 12-year-old, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think setting a realistic goal, like if they're 17, for example, and they're thinking
Mhm.
about college, yeah, saving up $500 or $1,000 is a really good,
Yeah.
minimal goal. I think that's appropriate for that age. But as an adult, I think you
Yeah.
really need to have 1 month of expenses first, then move
Hmm.
on to maybe working on debt and other things. But that's
Yeah.
your first step.
That's great. Thank you. That's all I had. So, David, take it away.
She likes to wait till the end and not ask her questions. So I want to get her
Love
involved.
it.
I
Love
don't
it.
like to interrupt. It's so not my nature.
And I won't stop talking unless you interrupt me. Um, so then I like what you said there too about having the 1 month because that it's a good foundation to start on. If you at least if something happens, you lose your job, you have 1 month to get back on your feet and
Mhm.
kind of get. And five hundred
Mhm.
dollars in today's world is not going to get you
Right.
anywhere. Um, Now before we go, when it comes to one of the things we like to touch on is communication. So I kind of just want to harp on in your field, you're dealing with people's finances, so there's an emotional, attachment they have to their situation, whether they did really good, they did really bad. How do you use communication to kind of, if they're riding the high, bring them back down to, a neutral, and if they're really down, get them back up into that neutral, so where they can look at their finances from a logical place rather than from a very emotional place.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I also have a background in financial therapy. I've got a certified financial
Okay.
therapist designation, which I introduce a little bit of financial therapy into my work. And a lot of that comes um, like is manifest in the form of talking about things like money scripts, financial trauma from the past, and
Mhm.
creating a judgment-free zone because so much of the time we feel so much shame around money. So, I've talked to families who are like, yeah, we were embarrassed to even reach out to you because we have so much debt and we made so many bad decisions and it's just bad, bad, bad. And they just had all this shame they were unloading. And I was like, you know what? Like that all happened before, 10 o'clock today. So from this point forward, we're going to focus on the future. We're not going to have any shame. We're not going to have any judgment around it. We all make mistakes. And so, what I personally do is try to create a judgment-free zone where it's like, hey, we're not going to worry about the past. We're going to focus on the future. Um, and a lot of that comes to is also reminding them, hey, if you look on social media, everyone else looks like they have their act together. They're spending money on vacations and cars and, who knows how much debt they're in. Like no one's putting their financial mistakes online, or most people aren't anyway. And so everyone's dealing with their own stuff, we're fine. Um, And then sometimes we'll talk about things like money scripts on money trauma. So Dr. Brad Klontz is one of the leaders in developing what's called money scripts, where there's different money scripts people kind of exhibit, whether it's money vigilance, money avoidance, money status, money worship. And that's all sometimes tied to how we grew up with money in childhood. So for example, if our parents said things like, "Oh, well, we don't talk about money," or "Don't ask me how much I make," or one of the first memories I vividly remember is asking my uncle how much money he made. And he was an architect, he had a big fancy house. I later learned he was in lots of debt, but he had a big fancy house, this vision of wealth. And I was like, "How much money do you make?" And I think I was like 10 maybe. And he was like, "Not enough." And he like laughed and ignored my question. And that to me taught me early on, we don't talk about money.
Mm.
It's not polite to ask somebody how much money they make, and we're not supposed to know those things. And so things like that can instill money avoidance scripts in us from an early age, which means now we're grown up, we don't pay bills, we don't look at money, we don't open the mail because it's going to be a debt collector. Like we just avoid because money is shameful. And
Mm.
so some of that comes from uncovering some of that and talking through it and helping families develop tools to overcome those things and manage those money scripts in a more healthy way. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but those are some of the things I go to when it
No,
comes
it
to
does because
emotions around money.
it would be whatever situation you're gonna see what script they're kind of playing in their
Yeah,
head
yeah.
around the situation and then kind of get away. Now, when it comes to that, how do we as parents model the correct money scripts with the kids to now you can't avoid your brother or their uncle or something saying something off the wall, but how do you kind of set the good example for the kids and get the correct money scripts? I don't know if that's the right term
Mhm.
to be playing in their heads when they do enter the world. That internal dialogue is correct.
Yeah, well, I hesitate to say there's a correct money script because it's all just part of us. But I
Okay.
would say a healthy relationship with money is what I would
Mm.
be trying to shoot for. And that takes the form of, hey, earning an income is important. You've got to provide value to the world. Here's how you get there. Um, Instill values of giving and being generous as well. Hey, when you build wealth, we've got a responsibility to help our community and our society as a whole, uplift others with resources as well, um, saving money, and being open about talking about it. I think the biggest thing we can do is to not be weird about money. If our kids ask us about money, treat it like a normal thing. Like, hey, yeah, I'm not, or we can say things like, I'm not going to answer that question right now because you're not old enough to understand. We'll talk about it in the future. We can say things like that,
Mhm.
but we don't want to make money conversations weird. We
I
want to
love
make money a normal thing we talk about. And I think the tone that we take when we talk about it is really important. Again, if your child asks you how much money you make and you're like, "Oh, you can't ask me that," suddenly money's weird. But if you're like, "Hey, that's a great question. We're going to talk about that when you're a little bit older," that's a different tone, right?
it. I love that. All right. So if you work virtual, are you able to help people in every single state? How does that kind of
Mhm.
certification? You are awesome.
Yep.
So
Yep.
if parents are looking, where would be like the best place and they want to use your services, where would be like the best place they can find you?
Yeah, sure. Appreciate that. My website is elevationfinancial.com, and that's the best place. You can reach out there. You can book a complimentary consultation, find me on social media, find my podcast, blog. It's all there.
I love that name, by the way.
Yeah.
Elevation
Nice.
Finance. That's awesome. And then the podcast, just to kind of give them an overview, or what are you discussing? Is it like family finances, everything to do with finances? What are you kind of discussing on that podcast?
Yeah, so it's a lot of different topics. A lot of it's geared toward business owners also. So I work with a lot of
Love it.
business owners, and so often
Okay.
you'll see a topic like, for example, this week's podcast is about making sure your entity filing stays current so your business doesn't get dissolved by the state. So it's like,
Mhm. Yes.
administrative stuff like that sometimes. But it's a variety of things. So I'm on episode 287 at this point.
Wow.
So there's a lot
Heck
of
yeah.
topics there from investing to budgeting to debt. So a lot of different topics there.
Would you be something that like a high school age kid could pop in there and listen to as well? I mean,
Yeah, I think
if they're
so.
interested in
Yeah,
business and finances. Okay.
absolutely.
Awesome.
In
Heck
fact, I've
yeah.
got a couple episodes on business. One is how to start a business for less than $1,000. And it goes through step by step, like, hey, form the LLC. Here's the most inexpensive systems you can use. Basic website, logo, like really email account, like all the basic systems to get up and running for literally less than $1,000, and you've got a business running. So if anyone's kind of
Love it.
looking to start a side business, or a high schooler kind of looking to launch something in the future. That, stuff like that is out there too.
Without, man, that's awesome. That's awesome. All right, well then, I guess we'll wrap it up. We'll be respectful of your time here. We're coming in on an hour. Is there anything else that you want to say before we pop off?
No, it's been great. This is a little bit of a detail I want to go back to because I talked about those three things: keeping debt low, keeping savings high, focus on savings rate. I wanted to add a little bit to the savings rate
Do
point
it for sure.
and kind of give some real numbers there. So I like to see between a 10 and 20% savings rate as
Okay.
kind of a healthy zone. And so if someone's putting money into 401k, Roth IRAs, retirement accounts, stuff like that, 10 to 20% is the zone that most people really should be in. 10% being the minimum, 20% being like really healthy. So I want to kind of add some context to that
I love
savings
it.
rate for those 3 points.
Man, that's awesome. That is awesome. All right, Mr. Reynolds. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, my man. Have a good
Okay.
one.
All right. Thank you
Thank
both.
you.
All
All right,
right. See you
bye-bye.
later.
Bye.